Welcome, everybody, to the Week 17, the Championship Weekend live edition of the PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast, where we give you our predictions, our picks, with the hopes that we help you prevail today in your championship game for the 2021 fantasy football season. I am your host, Nick Giacobbe, and joining me is Nick Cap. Nick, I think you're in one or two championships today. You won one for sure. Just one? All right, so how are you feeling, Nick? How are you feeling heading into that championship today?
I feel disappointed I'm only in one championship, but we move. It's the nature of fantasy. Sometimes you get your worst week ever the first week of playoffs, and you come back the next week, and then 4 of those leagues score the most points you have on the entire season. But it's all good.
I want to reiterate this point, and it's a point that I've spoken about before and a point that I've dealt with for years. The best team, in my opinion, does not win the fantasy championship most years. It just doesn't happen. I know in our league, for example, the one seed has only won once. The one seed that is, or the team that has scored the most points. That is yours truly in year 2. But the one seed or the team that scores the most points rarely wins it in our league. We've had, what do we have, 6 years now? Let's see. Yeah. This is year 6, I think. Maybe, let's see. Pat, me, Moldy, and Joe. Yes, this is year 6. So in 5 years, you've only had one champion who has either the highest scoring points or the first seed. For example, in my Dynasty League, I'm the 4th seed right now, and I'm facing the 6th seed in the championship. Let's see. In this league, in this 12-man league that I'm in a championship in, it's actually the 1-2 teams that are playing. So that one actually did work out. And then in our league, we have the 2 and the 4 are playing. So again, like it just doesn't happen. So don't be disappointed if you didn't get to your championship and you scored the most points. You probably still have the best team, but that's just kind of the nature of fantasy. Hopefully your league gives out money for points like my league does. So I do have a chance at the points today, which is basically a championship. So let's get right into it. If this is your first time listening, thank you so much and welcome to the show. We do only have one more show left. Well, I guess for the 2021 season, technically, we'll have a recap episode this week. Just on Friday, probably we'll just talk about the whole season, studs and duds for the whole season, a recap of the entire season, and a little bit of a lead-in into next season. Yeah. We don't have an off-season plan as of yet. We know we're going to give you guys content in the off-season. Me and Nick will sit down and talk about exactly what we want to do, both for the off-season and both for next season. But we will give you shows in the off-season, probably when free agency starts, during free agency, definitely around the draft time, especially for dynasty leagues. But there's just not much we can do on a week-to-week basis at this point. So our normal shows that are normally on Tuesday, Fridays, and Sundays will not happen. We'll keep you guys updated. We'll drop shows, and that'll be season 2 of the PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast. But for all of you guys that have listened, thank you so much. If you do want to support the show, the audio version is on iTunes, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, basically anywhere where you could find a podcast, you could find the PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast. If you are on iTunes, please give us a 5-star rating and a review. It really does help. And I believe on Spotify, you can now either leave a review or put us in your top 5, something like that. So if you can do that, we'd really appreciate that. If you'd rather watch and listen to the show, go to our YouTube channel, PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast. If you want to support the show on social media, and please do, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok is PrimeTimeFFPod. YouTube and Facebook is PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast. All right, guys, if you're in on the live show, you can ask us questions throughout the entire show. It's championship week. We want to help you guys out to the best of our ability. We have a championship week preview. We have questions. Ask us any questions you want. We're going to start off with questions that were asked on our social media channels. First up on Twitter, Mark Malerba, he says Brandon Ayuk, Jarvis Landry, or Devontae Parker at wide receiver 2. His wide receiver 1 is Davante Adams.
That's tough. I'm going to take a look through these matchups real quick.
I'm going Ayuk. He's going up against the Texans defense that have surrendered a lot of points to wide receivers. And Ayuk's been pretty solid after the bye. He's had 6 weeks over 10 points, a couple under 10 points, but his targets are pretty good. I mean, he's at over 5 targets in in 7 of those last 10 games. So Ayuk's getting the targets, and he also has 4 touchdowns. So Ayuk's not just getting targets, but he's also getting targets towards the red zone. So I think he's the safest play here. Devontae Parker just put up a goose egg against the Saints defense that surrendered a lot of points to wide receivers. I think Lattimore may have been shadowing him, but still, that's a goose egg. If you played Parker last week, I don't think you're in your fantasy championship. So I don't think this guy played Davonte Parker last week. And as for Jarvis Landry, I just really don't trust the Browns. They're just one of those teams that I really don't want any part of from a fantasy perspective. I mean, Landry's had 4 weeks over 10 in his last 8. That's about a 50%, but I just feel like Ayuk has the most upside out of these 3 wide receivers.
I agree. Ayuk has the most upside. If Davonte Parker didn't put up the goose egg this past week, I tell you easily start him. I agree with Nick. I think I'll go with Ayuk. I think that I think him and Lance are going to look a lot better than they did early on in the season. I have a good feeling about that duo going into next year as well. And I think I would flex Davonte. I know it was a rough game, and Lattimore was shadowing him for the majority of the game, but that was his only game under 5 targets this entire season when he was healthy. He's averaging, excluding that game, he's averaging, I think, 8 targets per game. So the workload's clearly there, and it just looks like one of those bad off weeks. It's just a really bad time to have that off week. I know that there's going to be concerns. I would be concerned as well if I had to start him. But if you look at the rest of his season's production, I think you just have to say, all right, it's a one-off. We got to go, and we got to play him.
So the second question he has, Nick, for a flex, do I play one of these wide receivers or I'm going to butcher his name again, Ugunbowale on Jacksonville, the running back that'll be starting in place of James Robinson? I'll say this first off. I'm not playing Ugunbowale. I'm not trusting him in my fantasy championship, a running back that we never really seen play. He played a bit of last week's game, but he's going up against that Patriots defense that I think can hold him to under 5 points. I think the Patriots defense could shut out the Jaguars today. I don't think it's going to be pretty. So I'm knocking out Ugunbowale, and I'm knocking out Ayuk since I'm already playing him. I think I'm going to agree with you at playing Parker at the flex. I really don't trust Jarvis Landry on Monday night. Again, I don't really trust Baker. I don't really trust the Browns. I don't really want to trust that offense unless you have Nick Chubb. He's the only Brown at this point that I'm going to trust. The last time that he did face the Steelers was week 8. He had 12 points, 5 receptions on 10 targets for 65 yards. So not a bad game, but still. I just have a feeling that Landry's not going to have a great game. So I would also flex Parker, and I'm assuming that's the answer you're going with as well.
Yep.
All right. Joseph G4112, Mike Williams, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, or Jeff Wilson. He said if Jeff Wilson is starting, the news that I saw this morning is that Elijah Mitchell will be starting for the first time in a couple weeks. So I'm taking Mitchell off this list, and I'm sticking with my bread and butter. I don't trust Packers wide receivers not named Davante Adams. I'm going with Mike Williams. He's too much upside.
I agree. He has a ton of upside, but you're going up against that Denver secondary. I'm not trusting Mike Williams. Jeff Wilson has the perfect matchup, but with Mitchell coming back, it's a question mark. I'm going MVS. They're going up against the Vikings defense, who has allowed the first or second most points to fantasy wide receivers. I know it's a flyer, but in the championship, you're always going to have to take a flyer, and I think MVS will be that guy this week.
I think this is an interesting conversation that me and you can have for a moment. What do you do in your championship? Do you trust the guys that have got you there based on name or maybe their rank or whatever? Or do you kind of go for somebody who might be a little bit of a stretch or somebody that may be a wild card with a chance of propelling you to that fantasy championship? It's a real good conversation to have.
So let me pull up. I saw the stat earlier. Let me take a minute to pull it up. But I'll tell you this from 2 years ago. It will bite you if you are not willing to adjust your team in the playoffs the same exact way, and the actual NFL teams will get bitten if they're not willing to make uncomfortable decisions, near the end of the season. It's the same exact thing. If I were you, one of the biggest things that I would recommend is just look at the last 2 games and average them out. Because if you said to me, here's 2 players I'm trying to think of 2 players that had weird years. I remember 2 years ago, the biggest one was Kenyon Drake, the last 2 games, where he averaged, I think it was 35 or 40 points per game in the semis and the championship game. And it was you had to lock him in that championship week, and nobody trusted playing him because of the situation, but you knew he was the guaranteed starter. You knew they were giving him that workload. Like, every check mark was there. It was just the one-off that people didn't want to agree with. and he dropped 40 points and won a lot of people who didn't wind up making the decision championships. You need to know who to adjust in those situations.
It's just so tough. I mean, last year, the one that I always sat on is in my semifinal, I decided to play Russell Wilson and DK Metcalf against Jalen Ramsey in our league that I had a ridiculous amount of points. I believe the second most points that anybody's ever scored in a season. I think Palmer beat me up by like 19, but I also think there were more bonuses that season. Anyway, I didn't want to play Russell Wilson or DK. I didn't. I played them based off name value, and it bit me in the ass. I should have played Herbert. I think he had like 40 points or something. I should have played Justin Herbert, and maybe it would have propelled me to a fantasy championship.
All right, so here's exactly what I'm talking about. Here's your last season. Here were the top 10 running backs in championship week. Alvin Kamara won. We all know the monster game he put up. Myles Gaskin, Samaje Perine, David Johnson, Jeff Wilson, A.J. Dillon, J.D. McKissick, David Montgomery, Giovanni Bernard, Jonathan Taylor. 2 of those guys were drafted in your top 10 this year.
Yeah.
2 of those guys were probably drafted in your top 30, 40. David Montgomery is the only other one that cracks that. You got no one to adjust.
Well, let's talk about adjusting here. I'm going to ask this question. My friend Trent texted me this yesterday. He didn't post on social media. He said, need to play 3. Justin Jefferson, Antonio Brown, CeeDee Lamb, Jamar Chase, Jalen Waddle.
I mean, that's a good problem to have.
It's a tough one. I ran it through it with him, and it's really, really tough. The one guy that I singled out was CeeDee Lamb. He's going up against that Cardinals defense, who's been pretty tough against wide receivers. I could get the number right here off of Fantasy Pros. The Cardinals are maybe they're not as tough as I thought they were. Yeah, they're like middle of the pack. I thought they were tougher on wide receivers. But I mean, CeeDee's a 15th ranked wide receiver on the year, and he's not been bad the last few weeks, but his last 3 are 14, 11, and 10. Not bad numbers, but when you have those other wide receivers, I feel like they have a greater chance of putting up better numbers. I told him I love Jalen Waddle. He's my lock of the week. I love his matchup. I think he's a wide receiver like 14 on the year. I think he had like 20 points last week. I think he's become Tua's favorite target, and probably a reason that Tua has played very well this year. But Waddle over his last 4, 20, 31, 18, bye out against the Jets due to COVID, and 25 against New Orleans. And now he's going up against that Titans defense. The matchup's great. I think you have to lock in Waddle, as great as these receivers are. So I'm picking Waddle just based off of that. Then I want to look at Jamar Chase here. Jamar Chase is the wide receiver 6 on the year, but over his last 4, 10, 25, 1, and 22. But his target numbers are still great. I mean, 8, 8, 4, and 10. I know Kansas City's been tough against wide receivers, but I don't think he's benchable in your fantasy championship. I think that the matchup isn't great, but still, like, I feel like that's one that I have to play. So then it's between CeeDee Lamb, Antonio Brown, and Justin Jefferson. This is where the argument gets really tricky, because Justin Jefferson has been really great this season. Right now, Jefferson is sitting at let's see if I can find. He's sitting at number 4. You don't bench the number 4 wide receiver on the season. I mean, the last time he scored under 10 points is like week 8. Since then, 20, 25, 40, 13, 38, 20, 14, 22. I hate the matchup. I hate that he's going against Jair Alexander. I hate that he doesn't have Kirk Cousins. I hate that he's going up in Lambeau. I hate it all. But I feel like the talent outweighs that. So then I don't have to bench A, B, and CeeDee. And I don't really like that. I love playing AB because I feel like he's going to get fed the ball, and he has a great matchup against the New York Jets. I know that Mike Evans is coming back in a limited capacity. I also know that AB's been banged up, but last week he had 23 fantasy points, 15 targets, 10 receptions, 101 yards, no touchdown. I don't know what to do in this one. I'm taking CeeDee out, but the other 4 are a real toss-up. So I want to hear your thoughts on all of that.
Okay, so mine's a lot easier than yours. First off, Jamar Chase is the first one I'm benching out of this group. Jamar Chase is going up against Kansas City's defense. Over the last 7 weeks, they've allowed 3 touchdowns and then 4 to the Chargers. So, you know, over a 7-week span, allowing pretty much averaging 1 touchdown per game, and that one outlier against the Chargers. That's not a formula for success. Can Joe Burrow ride the hot hand? Sure. Do I think he's talented? Absolutely. But this includes matchups to the Raiders, whose offense has been hot most of the season, the Steelers, who were putting up 20 points per game, the Chargers, obviously, the Dallas Cowboys, who clearly are one of the hotter teams in the league. So they're locking down good teams. They're not locking down Joe Schmoes. So it's debatable enough where I'm willing to sit Chase, considering the inconsistency over the last 4 or 5 weeks. Jefferson is absolutely a lock, no question. I agree with you. Waddle would be my second lock, and then I think the debate's between CeeDee Lamb and Antonio Brown, and I'm going with Antonio Brown because Tom Brady hates the Jets and is going to pass against them. He literally said in an interview just a couple days ago that the Giants and the Jets were his worst two favorite teams, and he couldn't decide which one he hated more, even though he lost 2 rings to the Giants. So for me, Tom Brady's going to throw. He's going to throw to Antonio Brown. Antonio Brown's the number 1 wide receiver out there. CeeDee Lamb sharing with Cooper, Schultz, Gallup, Zeke, Pollard. Just too much of a workload where I think it's debatable. Antonio Brown, I think, is a must-start.
I think I like your argument more than I do. I don't know, the Jefferson thing, it's really tough. I feel like you can't bench it, but that matchup sucks. It sucks so much.
Justin Jefferson without Adam Thielen has a 46 or 47% target share. So that means practically 1 out of every 2 balls that gets thrown is going his way.
Yeah. Alrighty, another question from Joseph G411. Last question we have: Braxton Berrios, Gabriel Davis, or Van Jefferson? I hate it. I hate these options.
I know it's a 12-man league and he's got some COVID stuff or some injury stuff.
I want to know who's playing for the Bills. If Cole Beasley and Emmanuel
Sanders are off the COVID.
They're off the COVID list. So I'm not playing Gabriel Davis then. He's out. I think I would play Berrios just because of the target share. Like, I don't know. The Bucs don't have anybody in their secondary really. They've been good against wide receivers from a fantasy perspective. They've allowed the 6th least amount. But I mean, I don't really want to play Van Jefferson. He's the wide receiver 3 on that team against the Ravens. Haven't been phenomenal against wide receivers, but I don't want to play wide receiver 3. I'll play Berrios in that one.
I'm taking a look who else he has. He doesn't have to play Berrios. The other person that we talked about was MVS, which he could slot in. He also has Mike Williams in. I think I'd probably rather play Mike Williams and MVS.
So those are his 2 options. Like who are his options?
He also has the guy Patterson, who's the backup for Washington.
No, I'm not trusting a backup against the Eagles. No.
And then Kareem Hunt, who's been very.
Can he play Kareem Hunt?
He can play Kareem Hunt.
I think I'd rather play Kareem Hunt.
The only thing is he's questionable, and you're not going to know until Monday night.
Yeah. Pick up the backup, maybe. I don't know. Maybe. I don't know. That's tough. I would play MVS over Berrios.
I'm going to tell you right now what I would do. If special teams points count for returners, I would play Berrios.
Okay.
Because the Bucs special teams is absolutely horrendous.
Mm-hmm. All right. That is all the questions we have for this week so far. But if you jump in the chat, if you have a question for your championship, let us know. We'll answer all of your questions. We now have a championship week preview. We're going to go game by game, give you the injury updates that we can. It's 9:52 a.m. Eastern time. So we'll give you all the updates we have. So Tampa Bay Buccaneers at the New York Jets. Antonio Brown's ankle. Game time decision. He's expected to play. Mike Evans is a hamstring injury. He's going to play, but it's going to be limited. So let me ask you this, Nick. Are you benching Mike Evans?
No. There's no one on the Jets back end that's nearly talented enough to keep up with Mike Evans.
That's fair. All right, Nick, who's just starting to sit for you in this one? I mean,
Antonio Brown.
I talked about this in our lock flop. You're starting Ronald Jones to the moons. He's going to be a top 5 running back. I have to verse him in my dynasty league, and I'm miserable about that. And then I think you're benching Michael Carter. The Bucs have been very, very good against the run, surrendered the 2nd least amount of fantasy points to running backs. I think you're benching Michael Carter this week. I think there's better options out there.
I completely agree. My start of the week is Antonio Brown. My sit of the week. He's not really my sit, but the temper expectations is Michael Carter, and he hasn't been high enough of a scorer where temper expectation can mean must start anymore. So,
Miami Dolphins at the Tennessee Titans. No injuries in this one, as far as I can tell. I believe A.J. Brown might have been a little dinged up, but I think he had like 20 fantasy points last week. So he's locked and loaded this week against Miami. So who's just starting to sit for you in this one?
I know you love Jalen Waddle. I don't love, but I like Devontae Parker, so I'll play Devontae because I know you're taking Waddle on that end. On the Ravens side of the ball,
I may not talk about Waddle. I'm actually looking at some stuff right now.
I think Hollywood Brown would be my my sit.
Hollywood Brown or AJ Brown? Hollywood's not on the Titans.
What are we talking about?
AJ Brown?
Miami. Oh my god, I thought you said
no.
I was looking at the next game. My bad.
AJ Brown.
Okay. Yeah, because I was confused because you said the game and I'm like, that's not the game.
Yeah.
Well, it's the running backs all the way for Tennessee. It's the same thing that we've been saying all year. I think that there is clearly a one now, but I still don't think I'm trusting Tennessee's running game. I think A.J. Brown's clearly the way they move the ball down the field.
I am not trusting the Dolphins running backs. Myles Gaskin was an on-off starter this year. Duke Johnson ate into his carries last week. I'm just not trusting either of them in the fantasy championship. Same with those Titans running backs. And the Titans have been really good against the run, but I think you play Waddle comfortably, and I think you could play A.J. Brown comfortably. And you could flex Devontae Parker depending on your league, but I wouldn't comfortably start him. Los Angeles Rams at the Baltimore Ravens. Marquise Brown, he has an illness. He didn't practice this week. It's not COVID, but he's expected to play. Lamar Jackson has an ankle sprain. I don't think he's going to play. He's going to test it out. He's questionable. I think Tyler Huntley's going to start.
Yeah.
Tyler Huntley looked pretty good in the system without, so I think they're going to start Huntley, but who knows? We'll see what happens. So who's starting to sit for you in this one?
Quite simple, still benching Hollywood Brown. He didn't play too well with Huntley last time. It was the Mark Andrews show. That's pretty much going to be the case again. They're just going to try and force feed Mark Andrews. That's the only way they're going to succeed in this game at all. And my start is Sony Michelle. Sony Michelle's leading the league in rushing yards over the last 4 weeks. He's been clearly defined as the RB1 out there. Cam Akers is still not going to return this game. As much hope as the team has had recently.
They said he's not playing. He's locked him over the playoffs. They said he's not playing this week. So
Sony Michelle has just been on the hot streak, ride the hot hand. They should be up early in this matchup and be walking all the way to a win.
Yeah, I mean, I'm right with you. My start is going to be Odell Beckham. Let me get my Rams hat on here because I am playing Odell Beckham this week. Odell Beckham has helped me multiple times. So I got my Rams hat on. Go Rams this week. Go Odell Beckham this week.
How dare you?
We need a big win this week from Odell Beckham. So we need a big game. We need like 100 yards. We need a touchdown. We need like 6-7 receptions. Go Rams. My girlfriend's family got me this hat. It's actually I don't like the Rams. It was a joke Christmas gift. Nick knows I do not like the Rams, but I can't lie. This is a pretty cool Rams hat. This logo is actually pretty sweet. So go Odell Beckham Jr. and the Rams. I'm not rooting for the rest of the Rams. All right. Going on to my hair got messed up because of the hat. My hair likes to dip around a little bit over here. All right. Atlanta Falcons. I hate them so much going up against the Buffalo Bills. It's going to be a miserable day for the Falcons. So I took the Bills in my spread pool. Let's see. Sanders didn't practice. Oh, well, I guess this report is I put this in a couple days ago that Sanders didn't practice all week. Gabriel Davis gets some extra reps, but Emmanuel Sanders and Cole Beasley are now off the COVID list. So it seems like everybody else is good to go. Who's a start and a sit for you in this one?
My bench, I said it earlier this week, it's Kyle Pitts. As good as Pitts has been for fantasy, he has 1 touchdown on the season, and that was out in London. Over here, he's used to playing in that Florida Gators weather and in that Atlanta warm weather. He's not used to playing in that Buffalo tundra. It's not going to be a good showing from him. I think he'll still be a solid player. Don't get me wrong. I just don't think he's going to deliver a fantasy championship level week. On Buffalo's side of the ball, I like Devin Singletary. I called him my start of the week. I think Devin Singletary has a good matchup. They figured out not to be too Josh Allen dependent over the last 3 weeks. Over those last 3 weeks, his least amount of points in a single game was 15. And going up against Atlanta's horrendous defense, quite an easy formula. Go play Devin Singletary.
Dawson Knox and Stephon Diggs and Josh Allen, for that matter, should have phenomenal games. I think all three of them are going to score. Knox probably 10 plus, Diggs probably 15 plus, Allen 20 plus. If you drafted Josh Allen in rounds 4 or 5 and you made your championship, he's going to reward you today. If you drafted Stephon Diggs, he's going to reward you today. If you got the sleeper in Dawson Knox, he's going to reward you today. I think they're all going to have big games in your fantasy championship. As for the Falcons side, I am benching.
Oh, just another thing that I'm looking. I wanted to look right now.
Yeah.
There is a 60% chance of snow in Buffalo for this game.
Interesting. Okay. I'm benching Cordell Patterson. The Bills have been really good against the run. I'm not trusting Cordell Patterson in my fantasy championship.
This is going to be a very interesting conversation next week about Cordell.
Oh, yeah.
He's probably going to be the most fun and least fun player to talk about.
Jacksonville Jaguars at the New England Patriots. I think this is a pretty simple one, Nick. You're benching all your Jaguars.
In my opinion, you're benching all your Jaguars. You're benching all your Patriots that aren't a running back, and maybe Hunter Henry.
My start is the Patriots defense.
Oh, yes. I like that play.
I like the Patriots defense play this week if you need to play a defense.
That is a fair play.
New York Giants at Chicago Bears. Andy Dalton is starting. Nick Foles is the backup. Everybody's still injured for the Giants. Mike Glennon's starting. I think every receiver's out except for Slayton.
Kenny Golladay.
Which one is Golladay? Saquon will be playing.
Catch a touchdown.
I hate this game. The Bears are favored by 5.5, and I don't know who to pick in my spread. I think I took the Bears because the Giants are just terrible, but the Bears are too. Like I hate it. But my start in this one is David Montgomery because the Giants have given up the 7th most fantasy points to running backs. David Montgomery probably helped a lot of people win a fantasy championship last year. I think he could help you win a fantasy championship this year. So I'm going to go with David Montgomery. I think I'm between Darnell Mooney and KJ Osborne in both my Dynasty League and in our league for the points. I haven't decided yet. I'm waiting to decide that one. I think right now I have Mooney in, though, because I think Mooney's going to get a lot of targets from any quarterback that plays, and the Giants' defense hasn't been good against wide receivers either, and the quarterback situation over there in Minnesota does scare me a bit. So I think I'm going to play Mooney in that one.
That's fair. I think Mooney has the higher upside, but I think Osborne's the safer play.
Yeah.
My bench of the week is Saquon Barkley. He has been absolutely horrendous this season since his injury. He has now reached my do not draft list. He has not cracked 65 rushing yards all season with double-digit touches in every game, but the game where he got hurt and the game where he came back from injury. That's enough for me to say this guy is not good enough at running the ball. The team is not good enough. Don't get me wrong. I still like Saquon to an extent, but he doesn't have that same burst that he's had. The same critiques we gave Zeke for the past 2 seasons is exactly what Saquon's getting right now. We know the talent was there, and it's clearly just diminished. He's just too battered and bruised. Been hit way too many times for a young running back. I just don't see him able to recover if he wasn't able to this year. So Saquon, I just don't think he's trustable. I don't think he's a good enough start in this game. On the other side of the ball for Chicago, it's David Montgomery, it's Darnell Mooney, and the rest should be hitting the bench. I think you can get away with playing Chicago's defense as well.
Yeah, I did pick up Chicago's defense, but I think I played the Eagles over them.
I played the Eagles over them too.
All right. Kansas City at Cincinnati. This is going to be this will be a really interesting game because I think we're really going to figure out a lot about these teams. Yep. How good is Cincinnati? And how good is Kansas City? If Kansas City keeps it within 10, then they're a legitimate team. If Kansas City blows them out, then I think Kansas City's just a Super Bowl favorite at this point. But from a fantasy perspective, Clyde Edwards-Helaire is out with a shoulder injury. He's had a bit of a rough season. Anyway, so Daryl Williams is going to get the start. And I'll start with that. I think Daryl Williams is very playable this week. I know that Chiefs defense has actually been really good against the run, but Daryl Williams is the running back 24 on the year. I forget exactly when Clyde Edwards-Helaire went out, but since week 6, Daryl Williams has had over 10 fantasy points 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times. And in those 7 times, he only has 2 touchdowns. So he's scoring with fantasy points without the touchdowns. He's also had over 4 receptions 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 times. He's had over 3 receptions, another 3 times. So he gets receptions. So I could see Daryl Williams getting a good amount of workload in this one. I would play Daryl Williams comfortably as a running back too.
Yeah, Daryl Williams is my kind of start of the week. I agree with you entirely, but the guy from this game I really like to start is T. Higgins. I don't think anybody's benching him, but he has been one of the most consistent wide receivers in fantasy football. Especially when you consider how talented that wide receiving core is, that he's kind of shown as the wide receiver one over the past few weeks and has been consistent over the entirety of the season. So T. Higgins is the guy that I really like this week. I've liked him pretty much for the second half of the season. The guy that I do not like this game,
I bet it's Tyler Boyd or Burrow. You say Boyd and Burrow every week.
I mean, it's Burrow. I've kind of buried Burrow. He had a great week last week, but he's been too inconsistent lately. This is his first big game, I think, in 5 weeks from a fantasy perspective this past week. And now he's going up against Kansas City's defense, where I read you the numbers early in the show. It's pretty much averaging 1 touchdown per game over the last 7 weeks. If you take away the Chargers game, it's 3 touchdowns over 6 weeks. So.
Yeah, if I'm benching a Bengal this week, I'm benching Tyler Boyd. I don't think he's going to get the target share. I know he had the big touchdown last week. He's been productive, but I'm going to bench Tyler Boyd. I'm not playing him in my dynasty league.
Yeah.
On to Philadelphia Eagles at the Washington football team. Miles Sanders is out. Jordan Howard has a stinger. He's questionable. He should split reps with Boston Scott. They're both expected to play. Antonio Gibson is out due to COVID. I am sitting like everybody on the football team. The Eagles have been really tough against wide receivers too. They've surrendered the second least amount of points to wide receivers. So here's one, Nick. Is Terry McLaurin like benchable today? Are you benching Terry McLaurin? I mean, I am. Like his last 5 weeks, 9, 5, 0, 7, and 7. I'm benching Terry McLaurin this week. What has he done to show that he's gonna go out there and win you a fantasy championship? And guess what? I'm saying that I'm benching him, but you know what? I'm bursting him this week. So I'm flipping my opinion. Terry McLaurin's actually going to have a day. He's going to have like 200 yards, like 2 touchdowns because I just said it. So I'm flipping my opinion. Terry McLaurin's my start because he's due for a big game. So I'm starting Terry McLaurin.
Funny guy. Terry McLaurin's my set of the week. I said it earlier this week. Terry McLaurin, last 5 games, has not cracked 10 points. The quarterback situation there is a disaster. Terry McLaurin is clearly still talented. It's just a terrible situation with a terrible matchup this week. So it's every reason why you do not want to play Terry McLaurin. My start of the week is kind of going to be a shocker. I think it's Boston Scott. But the reason
I'm playing Boston Scott.
You're playing against him?
In my 12-man, yeah.
Oh, man. Well, I just think Boston Scott's one of those weird running backs. And I read you the top 10 list last week. I can see Boston Scott going ahead and getting 2 early weird touchdowns. And that kind of delivers his fantasy week where he's good enough to have delivered. I just feel like he's one of those one-off big game type of players where I could just see it working. It's not the player I want to start. But if you're in a pinch, why not give it a shot?
I hope you're not right. For me, Davonte Smith to start for me. Davonte Smith has ESPN app wants to work. He's had over 4 targets in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 straight weeks. In those games, he's had over 40 yards in like 6 of them. He's had over 15 fantasy points in 3 of them. He had 19 last week with a touchdown. The football team surrendered the most fantasy points to wide receivers. So I think it's a great play. Jalen Hurts, though, is my starter of the week. Jalen Hurts is going to have a monster week. The football team has also surrendered the most fantasy points to quarterbacks. You drafted Jalen Hurts in round like 10 or something, and it's worked out really nicely for you. Jalen Hurts is going to win you a fantasy championship today. He's going to have a monster game. On to the Las Vegas Raiders against the Indianapolis Colts. Carson Wentz has found the cure for COVID-19 because he's back after 5 days. It's so ridiculous that they changed the rules in this one because Carson Wentz can play after testing positive on Monday. Darren Waller cannot play because he tested positive on Wednesday. I don't know, man. It's COVID. Whatever. Carson Wentz was activated off the COVID list yesterday. Darren Waller is out. Nick, is Jonathan Taylor going to win people some fantasy championships today?
You want to give your take on it because I remember you had an interesting one.
What was my take?
Temper your expectations.
Why did I say that?
I think it was because of the Wentz situation, but
Oh, it probably was because of the Wentz situation. I don't know. Like I still hate what the Colts do on the goal line. They get to like the 3-yard line, and Frank Reich will run like Naheem Hines, and then do a stupid screen pass, and then something else stupid. The Raiders are giving up the 8th most fantasy points to running back, so it is a favorable matchup. But Taylor don't get receptions, so Taylor's not winning a fantasy championship unless he gets you a touchdown. And you know what? I'm a guy who drafted Jonathan Taylor in 4 leagues. He got me to 2 championships. He also has a chance to win me a points title. So I'm really in 3 championship games today with Jonathan Taylor. I'm tempering my expectations because he doesn't get receptions. If he does not get a touchdown or 2, he's not winning me any of those fantasy championships because he doesn't get receptions. And I'm telling you this, Jonathan Taylor might be on my avoid list next year for my draft. He's gonna be in everybody's top 3. He might be in my avoid list solely because I'm not getting receptions. Because if he's just touchdown dependent, he's not going to keep up this ridiculous 17 touchdown streak or whatever that he's on. I think he has like 17, 18 touchdowns on the year or something like that. He's not going to have that next year. His receiver numbers, like 2 targets last week, the 2 weeks before that, 0 in both of them. Before that, the weeks that he had his best games, he's had 8 targets, 5 targets, 4 targets. If he's not getting targets today, Jonathan Taylor's not winning me a championship, and Jonathan Taylor will not be drafted by me in the top 3 next year. It's a bold statement, but
we'll talk about it next week. I'm interested.
We will, yeah. As a sit for me, you're not playing Derek Carr. I'm not playing Derek Carr against the Colts defense. I'll play Hunter Renfrow, though. Renfrow's going to get a lot of targets.
My start of the week is Josh Jacobs from this game. Josh Jacobs, Everson. It's going to be a great thing that I talk about next week. It's his role with John Gruden versus his role without John Gruden, and you will be shocked at the numbers. The Raiders have been one of the worst teams at running the ball this year, but Josh Jacobs was banged up for a little bit of time. Josh Jacobs was splitting reps. They had coaching changes. You know, they've gone through every single thing you don't want to go through as an organization this year alone. So I'm expecting it to change next year. I think it changes this week. I think Josh Jacobs goes and gives you a nice big day. On the other side of the ball, Michael Pittman's my sit of the week. The Raiders have been pretty good against wide receivers. I know the show goes right through Michael Pittman and through Jonathan Taylor, but temper the expectations on Pittman for this week.
All right, you're on to the 4:25 games. Arizona Cardinals at the Dallas Cowboys. James Conner's heel. He's a game-time decision. Didn't practice this week. It looks like Chase Edmonds could be the starter and could get the bulk of those carries. No other injuries in this one, Nick. So who's the start and the sit for you? My sit's Dalton Schultz. The Cardinals have been really tough against the tight ends. I think it's going to be Amari Cooper and CeeDee getting a lot of those touches, and they've also been really tough against running backs. So maybe temper your expectations against Ezekiel Elliott too. But Dalton Schultz is going to be my sit.
I think this is going to be such a big trap game where people are going to chase points, and it's not going to happen.
Could be a bit of a defensive matchup.
Arizona's really struggled to move the ball without DeAndre Hopkins, but my start of the week is Zach Ertz. Zach Ertz's target share has been incredible. He's ever since D-Hop's been out, he has the second most targets in the league, only to the number 1 tight end on the year, Mark Andrews. Shocker. So I think Zach Ertz has to be a must start for this week. I feel like he's just had too much of a workload, even though he hasn't delivered like the big fantasy game, league winning game over that time. The workload's there where you have to start him. On the Cowboys side of the ball, I'm a little bit hesitant on the wide receivers out there. Like we talked about a little bit earlier, CeeDee Lamb's got a little bit of a share. I don't think you can bench him unless you have that situation where our other guy did, where it's Jefferson, Antonio Brown, Jalen Waddle. I forget who the 4th guy was, or the 4th and 5th, but that team was loaded. There was enough reason to bench him. So I'm tempering expectations on the wide receivers out there. I guess if I had to say someone I would sit, I think it would be Dak. Dak kind of had that one-off incredible first half last week and has been inconsistent prior to for fantasy purposes.
Alrighty, Denver Broncos at the Los Angeles Chargers. Teddy Bridgewater is in concussion protocol. He's out, so Drew Lock is starting. Cortland Sutton should play. He had an illness this week, but it wasn't COVID, apparently. Jerry Jeudy and Tim Patrick, I believe, both did have COVID. I think they're both on the COVID list, so they're out. Melvin Gordon with his thumb injury will play. Javonte Williams with his knee injury will play. I hate this matchup. I really do. I don't know. I wish that I have Javonte Williams starting in 2 leagues. I wish Javonte Williams was the starter this week because the Chargers have surrendered the second most fantasy points to running backs. Rex Burkhead had like 25 points last week against them. I think one of these running backs is going to get a lot of points. I think whoever gets the touchdowns is going to be a top 5 running back play of the week, but I just don't know who's going to get the goal line work. I hope it's Javonte Williams for my sake, but it's really tough. It's really, really tough.
This is such a hard game to forecast because the Chargers, I found this out, have allowed the second most amount of points per game over the entire season. So it's incredible that they're even in the playoff conversation. That just is a testament to how good the offense is. And Denver's allowing the least amount of points per game over the entire season.
Yeah, they've allowed the third least amount of points to fantasy quarterback. So I'm not saying to bench Herbert, but I don't know if Herbert's going to have his best game today.
Yeah, I think that's a fair take. I think you're really just banking on an average game from Joe Herbert, which, an average game could be 17 to 22 points.
Yeah. So I would say Herbert's my not bench per se, but temper your expectations. And my start, it's going to be the Broncos running backs. I don't know which one is going to get more points. It's really tough to forecast. You don't know. It's whatever Vic Fangio feels like today. He's going to wake up on one side of the bed. It's a magic 8 ball for him. So we'll see which one he actually wants to use, but I think those Broncos running backs will have a pretty big day.
I love the Chargers on the season. I would be incredibly devastated, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Broncos pulled off an upset here.
Yeah, me too. I have the Broncos in my spread pool. New Orleans Saints at the Carolina Panthers. Last time they played in week 2, the Panthers won, I think, by like 20 points or something. Is Taysom Hill playing today? I think he is.
Yes.
Taysom was playing today. I think Sam Darnold's starting today too. My sit this week is going to be DJ Moore. Over the last few weeks, 14, 12, and 10. Not bad, but if he gets shadowed by Lattimore, I'm going to be a little worried about that. When he did have 21 against the Saints in week 2, but I think the Panthers are a dumpster fire right now, so I don't really want to play any of them. I don't want to play anybody else in New Orleans either. I don't really want to play anybody from this game. I'm starting the Saints defense and Kamara. I think that's really it.
I think that's fair. I think the Saints defense, I would call them a must start this week. If they're on your anywhere where they have the potential and not only finishes the defense one, but to score you 20, 25 points and win you the week, because Sam Darnold is just so turnover prone and New Orleans defense is incredibly complex to bait out interceptions. So it's literally a perfect setup for New Orleans defense to have a top 10 fantasy day. Forget about defense, a fantasy day. So New Orleans should be started in every league, no questions asked. Alvin Kamara, you have to start him, but I'd temper your expectations as well. I think Kamara is going to have a rough conversation next season for fantasy owners.
Yeah.
And I don't trust anyone on Carolina's side of the ball. I would say I trust DJ Moore, but I think he's getting shadowed by Lattimore this week. And Lattimore just shut down Devontae Parker last week. Devontae Parker is not as good as DJ Moore, but how much better is the quarterback situation there?
Yeah. Detroit Lions at the Seattle Seahawks. DeAndre Swift, I believe, is good to go, which worries me. Jake is number 1 in points right now by 20 points, and he has Swift going against that stinky Seahawks defense that is allowed, I believe. Number 1, no, they're number 3, the third most fantasy points to running back. So if you have DeAndre Swift coming back, lock him in. I think he's going to have a really big day. He could have a top 5 day for a running back. He's my starter of the week. You're starting DeAndre Swift. My sit of the week is the Seahawks, like just all of them. I'm playing Russell Wilson over Burrow in one league, and in another league I have to play DK Metcalf with my 12-man. But I hate the plays. I hate everybody in the Seahawks. There's so much negative energy around that team right now. There's nothing positive that I could say about that team at all. Nothing. There's a rift between Russ and Pete Carroll. There's a rift between Russ and DK Metcalf. There's a rift between the offense and there's nothing good about that team right now. It's broken. It's a broken football team. I have no confidence playing any of them.
I'll tell you what I do like in this game. I like this being a little does Seattle still got it game. I feel like this
could be Russell Wilson's last game in a home Seahawks uniform. So I hope he after this crappy season, he owes the fans to go out there. If it's his last game, he owes the fans in that stadium to go out there.
The fans anything.
What? Yes, he does. Yes, he does. He owes us 300 yards and 2 touchdowns at least. Yes,
maybe
he does.
This week.
Yes, he does.
I could see DK Metcalf having a big day here, only because the situation in Detroit, they're a bunch of hard fighters, but the thing that always like separates them is a superstar that they just can't cover. Like talent will outweigh the hard work. So I think DK is just too talented for anyone on that back end where I could see him having a massive day. Does he? I don't know. The team's just been so hard to judge. I think Rashad Penny, he's still the starter there. He had a really good week last week. I think he did. Let me check the numbers, but I think
I'm
Penny
not playing
played pretty
anybody
well.
on Seattle. They're just
I think I like Seattle's players a lot more than I would have if it wasn't the matchup. Yeah, he had 19 points, 135 yards on the ground, and a touchdown, and he's going up against Detroit. I think you give Penny a shot. I think you roll out your Seahawks players. I have no problem with you guys with playing DK, Tyler Lockett, and chasing those big Rashad Penny and Russell Wilson. I think you chase the points in this matchup. I could see this game being the highest over-under on the day. The over.
We'll see about that one. Houston Texans at the San Francisco 49ers. Jimmy G's thumb, it's like torn or something, and Kyle Shanahan still hasn't ruled him out, trying to play chess with the Texans. I don't think it's going to work. I think Trey Lance will start, and Elijah Mitchell is starting his first game in 4 weeks. And Elijah Mitchell is going to be my start if they give him the bulk. I think they will give him the bulk, but in his last 5 games that he played, 16, 19, 12, 9, 27, 17, Houston defense has given up a lot of points to running backs. They just gave up 34 to Justin Jackson last week. And if you play Justin Jackson like I did, you probably got to your fantasy championship. So Elijah Mitchell's going to be my start. My sit's going to be Rex Burkhead or any running back on the Texans. Don't chase it. The San Francisco 49ers have been phenomenal against the run. Brandon Cooks is the only one that I'm going to play on that Texans team.
I'm playing Trey Lance. Trey Lance is my start of the week. I know you don't want to trust a rookie quarterback, but in the 2 games that he started, he averaged a little over 17 points per game. And in those games, he had 23 carries between the two, with close to 150 yards between that. That's 7.5 points on the ground that you cannot turn down for a quarterback. All he needs is 1 touchdown, and he's given you a good enough fantasy week. And it's against one of the worst defenses in football, maybe the worst. I think it's just too good of a situation. This is one of those games where you got to say, forget about the player's name, forget about where they are. Just think about the matchup. Just trust what the stats have said in the past. I know it's not a big sample size, but I think Trey Lance is that guy, and I think he takes over here.
Alrighty, Sunday Night Football, Minnesota Vikings at Green Bay Packers. I would be much more excited for this game if Kirk Cousins is playing, because Kirk Cousins has beaten the Packers in the past. Kirk Cousins out due to COVID. He tested on Friday, so Sean Mannion will start. That's phenomenal. I think this game is very black and white from a fantasy perspective. You are playing Aaron Jones. You're playing Davante Adams. You're playing Aaron Rodgers, playing Justin Jefferson, and you're playing Dalvin Cook. The only question mark I really see is KJ Osborne, but his target share has been ridiculous without Adam Thielen, so I think he's a play too, especially if Jair Alexander is going to shadow Justin Jefferson. So that's all I got. That's what I got for this game.
Didn't they draft Kellen Mond? Why aren't they starting him?
I don't know.
It's interesting. Okay. I agree with you. I think you know who you're starting. You're starting those running backs. You're starting the wide receiver, one out in each, and then you're debating KJ Osborne or MVS.
I know you like MVS. I don't like MVS.
I like MVS this week.
Monday Night Football, Cleveland Browns at Pittsburgh Steelers. Big Ben's last game in Heinz Field. What did I do?
No, saying it's disgusting.
Oh, okay.
Gross game.
I don't know, man. This is like, I feel like the typical Big Ben when he would go out there and throw like 200 yards and 2 touchdowns in his last game at Heinz Field, but that noodle arm has not really looked good. Nick, you were talking a little bit at the beginning of the show about look at the last 3 weeks. Well, let's look at Mr. Najee Harris's last few weeks. 25, great game against the Vikings. 4 against Tennessee. 16 against Kansas City. I guess he played better against Kansas City than I thought he did. But that 4 was a real dud. I'm not as worried about him as I thought I would be looking at the numbers here. He had 21 last time against Cleveland. I guess I'm not as worried about him.
It's scary to say that Najee, his rookie year, has been probably the most consistent running back not named Jonathan Taylor in fantasy football.
Probably. Let's see. Last time, I'm trying to see last time. Nick Chubb worries me because he doesn't play well against Pittsburgh. He only had 7.5 last time he played Pittsburgh. front seven's good over there at Pittsburgh. So I would temper expectations for every single Brown. I would much rather play any Steeler than any Brown this week.
It's a good take. I would play that Pittsburgh defense. Baker Mayfield coming off 4 interceptions, going into prime time. I hate to say it, but I'm so proud everybody sees what I've been saying since this first season. How much he sucks as a quarterback. I don't care. I'm happy to hear it. I'm happy to hear it. Usually it's just the general media going on him, but now Cleveland Browns media is attacking him and treating him terribly. So I kind of feel bad for the kid, but
what are you doing with Chase Claypool? Chase Claypool's last 4, 7, 17, 1, and 8.
That's not a good spread for a receiver.
When he played Cleveland last, he had 4 receptions, 45 yards, 10 points.
I don't think I'd trust him this week.
I
think there's better options for you to stress Monday Night Football.
Yeah, I think so too. Yep. Alrighty, that's a full preview, guys. That is your full preview for your fantasy championship. Thank you to everybody that watched. Thank you to everybody that asked a question. Good luck to all of you in your championships, except for my 2 opponents. Nick, anything else you want to say before we head into Week 17?
Good luck. Make sure you stop by for our yearly recap next week.
Man, good luck to all you in your championships. We'll recap everything. Hopefully, me and Nick will be celebrating. I also want to. Before I forget, I also want to shout out my brother Joe. He got me and Nick little trophies each. Nick's is somewhere around there. My trophy says Primetime Fantasy Podcast #1 host.
Mine says Primetime Fantasy Podcast #1 co-host.
There you go. So I do want to shout out Joe for those gifts. I really do appreciate it. I wish you could see it, but I don't know. My camera doesn't really show it, but it is over here right next to good old Spider-Man. So thank you guys for that. Thank you for everything. We'll talk to you guys this week. Hopefully we're all winners when we talk to you. Season review. Best of luck, Week 17 championship week. We are out.